Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Velero community meeting and open discussion. Today is October 13th, 2020, and we're going to start, per usual, with some status updates. First up, we have Carlisia.
Hello. I opened a PR for the download request migration, but it's in draft because there is one test that's very annoying that I have to fix. I mean, I have to actually do the test. That's all that's pending. I'm not even very confident about the test that we have right now. Nolan, if you maybe could look at it, it just looks to me that's testing, not really the logic, it's just testing, it's one of those tests that's testing the actual libraries and APIs, but I could be wrong. But anyway, trying to make that work. And the other thing is there was a report of the way the backup storage location validates is not really taking into account the validation frequency setting, and a wonderful soul also opened the PR to fix it. So I'm testing that to get, and hopefully maybe we can merge that today. And yeah, I'm just gonna try to review some PRs on Helm as well, and Velero and Helm. That's it for me. And like Nolan is going to mention it on his review, we are looking into improving our support process. So I also wrote some stuff down yesterday for that. We'll share it at some point.
Sounds good. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Kalisia?
Yeah, actually, I had a question, but I think I have added it to the discussion topic. It's about the 2991, but we can talk about it in the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments? Do you have any blockers, Kalisia? Anything you need help with outside of the two items here?
I might actually need help with the tests that I'm working on. I'll see. I'll try to bang my head a little more.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, moving over to Nolan.
Yeah, so worked on the fix for this issue 2570. There appears to be a race condition where sometimes Velero, as a result of how Velero restores PVs and PVCs, a PV can get claimed by another PVC in a cluster. And basically, the way Velero volume restore works is it restores a persistent volume and then the persistent volume claim. And as a summary, what was happening here is the persistent volume was being restored, and then in some other namespace that was not the target namespace, the Kubernetes PVC controller, I can't remember exactly which one, PV or PVC, was seeing, hey, that PV matches the requirements for this PVC, so go ahead and bind them. And this boiled down to the fact that Velero was not keeping the namespace, or actually it wasn't keeping the claim ref on persistent volumes. So I have a branch that I've updated to keep the claim ref on PVs. This is very reminiscent of CSI stuff. I'm going to push that up today, but I want to run some tests to make sure this doesn't change anything in actual clusters. But this appears to be mostly an issue in really busy clusters, and it's a race condition, so it's not always something that happens. But it took us a while to understand this issue. So we're going to try to get this fixed into 152. And there can be security implications if you're using namespaces as a security construct to separate privileged access. So I'm going to try to get this out pretty soon, but I don't have a definite timeline. So yeah, excuse me. This took a little while to understand exactly what was going on, but it boils down to Velero needs to keep the claim ref on persistent volumes when it's restoring, and if you're using the namespace remap feature, it needs to update the namespace on the claim ref so that everything's linked up correctly. So we have this reproduction case that walks through the correct case if you do it manually, and we had a proposed fix down at the bottom, which is not the same. It's not the same way I did it, but yeah, it gets very close. So yeah. So hopefully that will, pending results of in cluster testing, we can get a PR out for that today and reviewed. And then, as Carlisia mentioned, well, I guess I'll pause and let anybody ask questions on that one.
Does anyone have any setups for testing the fix outside of Nolan here? All right.
Cool.
Questions, comments? All right, move on, Nolan.
Yeah. So the next one, as Carlisia mentioned, we did some brainstorming yesterday on ways we can improve our responsiveness to GitHub issues that are raised. So we want to make sure we get to people when they raise support issues in a timely manner. And we're also looking at how we can make sure we have a framework for scheduling actual fixes and giving people reliable timelines for those fixes. So we don't have anything definitive here. We're going to bring it to the rest of the team first, but that was just some brainstorming between us, and we're working through that right now. Also, this is something we've been saying we need to be getting done, and I really need to. This is, other than 2570, I think this is really high priority. Is we need to get the Azure and CSI plugins updated and released. Those two I know have fixes that would go along with our 1.5 series. I don't believe the AWS and GCP ones have as many fixes in them. But we've been saying we get that out for a while, and we actually just need to do it. So I'm going to carve out some time for that in the next day or two. And then just something I noticed, I think it was particularly with this PR Bridgette was mentioning when I was going through PRs yesterday. I noticed if a PR goes from draft to ready for review, it wasn't getting processed by our GitHub action that adds reviewers. I may look into that, but I'll probably just file a ticket for now, or file an issue so we can go look at that and make sure you get the action that adds everybody gets triggered at the right time.
So that's a little weird. Is that a GitHub action that's failing?
It's a GitHub action, and I think it's because my guess is we just don't have the proper event listed for the transition from draft to open. I don't know what that event is, but I think what I'll do is just file an issue so we can slot some time to go look.
Sorry, so I'm not aware. I haven't noticed this at all, but I also haven't been switching back and forth from those two things. So when you open a draft, it will add the reviewers, but when you transition, it will remove it?
No, I think when you open a PR as a draft, it does not add them.
Oh, I see.
And then when you take it from a draft to ready for review, it still doesn't add them. And it's fine that it doesn't add the, like in my mind, it's fine that it doesn't add them for a draft.
Yeah.
But when it goes to ready for review, it should definitely add them. So I think it really just requires, I think it requires going in and looking for the event for draft, the event name for draft to ready to review and adding that. Because I think we should definitely use the draft feature. It's great. I just noticed, I was like, hey, this one was ready for review and people weren't tagged on it. And so I'm thinking the action wasn't firing. And I think we only have it specified for 2 events. Like if you open a brand new PR that doesn't go through draft, and I forget what the other one is. But I'm not an expert in the GitHub API.
And you got a bunch of other APIs to worry about.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions, comments for Nolan? Okay. Moving over to Bridget.
Hi everyone. So I don't have a huge amount to report as I had a few days of PTO this week. So I'm just back today. So last week I opened the PR for the issue that we discussed during last week's community meeting around attempting to download the tarball to process delete item action plugins, and the error that happens if the associated cloud resources have already been deleted. Nolan has already commented on this, given he's already looked at the PR, so I need to follow up on those comments. I did take a quick look. I just wasn't, I think maybe just, I'll follow up in the PR, but it was just whether, how far we need to go with either retry logic or trying to introduce new error types, and whether that was something that we would do now or get an initial fix in first and then come back to this with a better design later. But I'll follow up with you after this, Nolan, or on the PR. That's it for me. I'd be interested to hear more once about the support process that Nolan and Kalisia have been discussing whenever I was away. So hopefully we can either chat about this, or I'll look at it whenever you've got it ready to share with the rest of the team. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Bridget. Any questions, comments for Bridget?
Just a comment for the 2993. I think like my intention for extending the error type, like if we require plugin interface changes, I don't believe it should go in this PR. The retry logic on, if we included any retry logic in this PR, I would think it would be simple, like 1 or 2, like literally hard-coded 1 or 2 tries to see if it was transient, and then just log that we couldn't get it. Without getting super deep into that's my thinking.
Okay, that makes sense.
But yeah, I think anything that dives all the way down into the plugin level stuff, I think we need to not address it here and address that directly with a separate design document.
Yeah. I think just my initial thoughts were, if you were going to try and do retry logic for transient errors, that maybe you wouldn't want to retry in the case where it doesn't actually exist. And I don't know if you can tell that it doesn't exist without specific error types. But if it's just like try again once or twice, then that should be fine.
Yeah, I think I think there's a 404 type or a 404 error that we bubble up somewhere.
Okay.
But I'd have to look. If it's like
Yeah.
if it's a 404, then we know. But
Yes.
I'd have to look at the persistence types again. Because some of that is something we'd have to translate between the object storage platforms, which is a little tricky.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you for the feedback. I'll have a think, and we could at least try and make some progress on this, even if it's just the retries for now before doing anything more complex.
Cool.
Thanks.
Awesome. I forgot to ask, so do you have any blockers otherwise, Bridget? Anything you need assistance with?
No, I don't think so. Everything's good otherwise.
Okay. And same question for you, Nolan.
No, I don't think so at the moment.
Okay, sounds good. Then let's dive into the discussion topics. Phuong, you have the first one.
Yeah, so I think I talked about this enhancement request a few, maybe 1 or 2 months ago. Basically, we want to able to time out when we run a plugin. The background information of that would be when we run a snapshot on vSphere, and it takes a long time because of some retry or something like that, and it takes a long time. And then when we because it is an app consistent, so we don't want to it takes too long. We have to be time out within a few seconds. So that's what we want to enhance. So, and I propose a change in if you scroll down at the note that I just post on this case, I propose how to change it. Just for the backup action item, I propose that we enhance it with the timeout, and then during the execution, instead of executing the gRPC client execute directly, we can execute it in a Go routine with a context with cancel, so that if the timeout occurs, we're gonna cancel that Go routine. So that's how I'm gonna write design file and create a pull request for us within this week. And then hopefully you guys can have some time reviewing it. That's it for me.
Yeah, a design doc would definitely be helpful. And so would this be for volume snapshot and backup item action then, or just backup item action?
I think I wanted to do for both, but maybe
Okay.
because I don't know how much of the bandwidth that I have, so maybe I can start with the backup item first, and then also see if I can cover the volume, persistent volume as well.
Okay. And I don't. One thing I want to make sure we address in that design document is backwards compatibility, because some backup item actions will assume that they don't have a timeout.
Yes, I think I would address that concern as well, which means that if it doesn't have a timeout, it should function as whatever before it. And yeah, I would put it in the design.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not at all opposed to this. And I guess my one last question is would this be per plugin, or would this be universal? So would you set one for all backup item actions, or would you set one for each individual backup item action?
I have to think about it a little bit more, and I need to talk to my team to see exactly what we need here for us, and maybe we can get back to you on that one, and probably we'll put that in the design doc to see this one would be for all of the plugin, or it's only for a specific type.
Okay, yeah. And
yeah, thank you. I think I will take that into my note and talk to my team about it.
Sure. And I'm linking in this PR. I'm linking to Scott Sseago's proposal about restore item actions, wait for additional items to be ready, because that talks about timeouts and stuff as well. So that might be worth a quick read through. It's a different plugin type, but he proposes ways for handling timeouts.
That's probably very good. I will look at it.
Yeah, I don't think it's exactly the same thing you're looking at, but this might be something we want to pull together, like handle them similarly.
Yeah, I was going to say, in my case, the timeout part is more a question that was kind of an open question, as to, because one of the things that proposal is to add a way of when a plugin sends an additional items saying we need this, there's no code right now that waits for that item to actually exist and be ready, and we don't want to wait forever for that. So the idea was we need a timeout, and so I guess this proposal might feed into that, or they might be separate, or we might just but the concept of timeout is still there. So in that sense, we should kind of think about it.
Right. Yeah. I think they're both overarching. They're both timeout for plugins.
I guess the difference is in this case that what you're talking about, the timeout itself is the point of being added, and for my proposal, a timeout is kind of an aspect of this. We need a timeout in place in order for my plugin enhancement to make sense, because otherwise things could block forever. But the timeout is kind of secondary to the intent, which is to prevent restores from failing, if the item isn't there yet.
Right. And I think your proposal just uses, like, we have a universal number that we use somewhere. And
yeah, exactly. That was the starting point. And I did mention the proposal. I wasn't sure that's the right thing to do. It's better to use that than to not have a timeout, but that might not be long enough in some cases.
Right. And
in that case, let me think about so that to see if my proposal can cover for both restore action item and backup action. I mean backup item action and restore item actions as well. So let me think about it, and I will get back.
Yeah, I think if we can make sure it addresses both use cases, I think that would help for the vSphere plugin too, because the vSphere plugin is, I would assume the vSphere plugin's going to have a similar issue with timeout things on the restore side based on how it works, because I think it has restore item actions that are going to have long running operations as well. I don't know if you've observed that, but that wouldn't surprise me.
All right. Any other questions, comments on that topic?
Just had a quick question. I know I missed the meeting last week, and Nolan had brought up my design PR as something to talk about. I didn't know if that was something that we needed to talk about today on here, and with there additional concerns beyond that timeout question, or whether that was a different concern.
The last I had brought it up, I'm looking for more folks to do reviews on it.
Okay.
I
from what I heard from Dylan, I got the impression there was some concern as to whether whether this was really needed or whether there was some other way that made more sense. I don't know. It's worth mentioning again the context as to where I saw that we needed this, and that was specific to one of the OpenShift resources is the image stream tag, where basically if you have one image stream that's an alias referencing another tag, if you restore them in the wrong order, the image stream tag that references the other will fail restore. You actually, it's not a Velero issue. Even just a regular control create will fail because it fails validation because it references something that doesn't exist. And if reverse the order and you do the thing that's pointed to first, then it will succeed. But we have this race condition where if you're submitting one restore followed by the other immediately following, and there's not enough time in between, it may still fail.
Right. And I also spoke to someone on our working on a Postgres operator here within VMware, and this proposal actually would be helpful for them as well.
Okay.
So they are running into some order of operations that the Kubernetes kind of eventually consistent model is unfortunately not working out there. So
right.
Having this forced wait would help them.
Yep.
I think my question was I wasn't sure of use cases that would use this.
Right.
I thought there would be ones out there. I just couldn't come up with them. But it sounds like we have at least two now.
And I think this is kind of closely connected to the use case for having that additional item slice in the first place, because the way that is implemented, when a plugin returns additional items, Velero completes the restore of those items before it comes back to restore the current item. And the only reason to do that is because you recognize that you want one restored before the other. And if you want that, then you also want the ability to wait to make sure it's ready in cases where, like in our image stream tag, where the actual, restore will fail. Whereas, in another case, if we have a CRD which has an item reference, and so you want to make sure it's there, but it follows that Kubernetes model of eventually ready, it's fine. Then you don't need to wait because it won't fail to create.
Right. Yeah. The Postgres operator definitely ran into this stuff, and I think Velero in general can run into issues when operators assume they're the only ones.
I mean, needing this wait is definitely the exception, which is again one of the reasons I propose doing it as an optional function pointer rather than something that everything we need to implement. Because of all the plugins that we have, we only have one example where we need this, and it sounds like the VMware, so the Postgres again is a similar case where you have one plugin where you have this issue, and then the rest of them it's not a concern.
Right. Yeah. I think in the cases where it's useful, it's super useful. But most of the time, like you said, if most things, hopefully you don't need it if you're following Kubernetes patterns and can be eventually consistent. But the reality is not everything can be that way. And I think there's some stuff inside of VMware that could probably take advantage of it as well. Like we're talking about some like restoring VMs. I think we may be able to use that there. So yeah, I'm not against the proposal. I would like to get more reviewers on it. Sure. To get more input. That's the main thing I'm waiting for there. Right. I think I had asked for more reviewers last week.
Yeah. And I think the one thing in the proposal that, again, it still sounds like it's a little bit not clear is that timeout part. But even that's something, if we need to put the timeout in using that kind of static value initially and then a follow-up change later, that's fine too.
Yep.
Make it more flexible eventually.
That's all I had for that. I just wanted to, in terms of timeouts, I just wanted to make sure these two ideas were connected because their timeouts are both involved. So that's all I had. I'm ready to move on to Dylan's topic if there's nothing else.
Hey, so I just wanted to really briefly bring up, so we have folks on our team, I think Pranav is on the call, so Pranav, jump in if I'm misrepresenting things, but we are interested in tackling this issue that's been around for a while around supporting restore progress. And I know that with the recent Velero releases, we've tackled, I kind of view this problem as multi-layered, right? The backup approach today, we don't have a fully accurate representation of progress reporting because it's dynamically changing at backup time. And I know the restore process is going to work the same way. But I wanted to get some thoughts, and I don't remember who actually contributed the backup progress reporting, but what are the thoughts on taking the same approach with restore, where we start with a first phase of saying, okay, we detected X number of objects in the restore or in the backup tarball that we're restoring from, and we are on item N of X, right? That's pretty much what I believe the current progress of backup is when you take out the PV progress. So we kind of thought as a first phase we would implement this, then maybe move on to enhancing both the backup and restore progress reporting. And I just wanted to get some thoughts on whether or not any work has been started on this, and if that approach makes sense if we go down that path.
That no one started on that. To me, that makes sense. And I think that was like the last thing Steve worked on before he moved over to Contour. And the idea with the backup, especially, I think the restore can be a little bit more accurate because, well, we don't have a two-pass system. With a two-pass system, we could be 100% accurate, but we have the full scope of everything that's going to be restored. We just don't know exactly what it is because we match selectors as we go through the loop. But we can say give our rough progress. So I'm okay with doing a phased approach and saying, hey, we've got X of N or N of X, or whatever way you want to put it. I think the challenge there is getting the total number because we don't pre-process that.
Well, actually, I just had this idea kind of right now. Since we do have that total number at the end of the backup, could we also potentially just write an extra metadata file into object storage that contains the total number of items that we've processed at backup time? I know it's not going to be fully accurate again because restore plugins could, subtract or change or add to that number, but it would be a more accurate representation, I think, than what we would get initially by just saying what's the number of backed up items, right?
Well, the reason I'm thinking the number isn't necessarily the total number in the backup, because if you do a restore with -- include namespaces, for example, sure, then it might be just the things inside those namespaces, or based on additional item actions, it might be PVs attached to those namespaces, or whatever plugins might pull in. So because we don't have a 2-pass restore system right now, it's hard to even get that first number. So as a concept, I definitely like the idea of doing a phased approach to implementing the status report. It may require some updates to how we do restore. Just because, like I know Steve and I talked a lot about doing a 2-phase restore so we can get this kind of information. So we can say what is everything that matches the selectors you specified it. Like, okay, take your include namespaces, your exclude namespaces, your label selectors, all of that. Get a definitive list, and then you have your number for these purposes. But
so was Steve the guy that had the current implementation of backup progress, where it's the rough estimate that's constantly updating? Was that Steve that did that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was based on pulling the API server. I get one thing we might be able to do for namespaces, without going too deep into implementation, for namespaces, if we download the tarball and look inside the directory for the namespace, we could maybe do the equivalent of like ls,
sure,
and wc, ls pipe wc-l. But that doesn't help with like label selection.
Yeah. Okay.
So it may be super limited to start with.
Okay. Well, we were. I was basically asked to. So I put off on the call. We have another person who's done a couple of contributions, I think, to the plugins. Jadip Kumar Gabani, and I think he's probably the one tackling this. And I was just hoping to get someone that he could probably bounce ideas off. But he was going to try to follow a similar pattern that was taken in the backup progress reporting. But it sounded like it wasn't a one-to-one thing. It couldn't take the same approach. So,
one more idea that I wanted to bounce here. It's the same that Dylan was saying, that somehow if we get the number of items in from the backup, and then so we would have this two status information. One is the number we got from backup, so that we can display the resources from backup that we have processed serially. And the other piece of information is the actual resources created against API server that can be taken at runtime. So would it be possible to have this separate kind of reporting, one that would actually take the number from backup and say, oh, I found 100 things from the backup, out of which I have processed 75, and now I'm at 76th. But if you look at how many I have created against API server, it's just 30 of those. I don't know if that would make sense.
I think the issue is knowing that larger number ahead of time. It's that, so there's two ways I think I know of. I just remembered there's a file in there. So if you do a backup describe -- details, I think it is, there's a feature I think that was added in 1.3 or maybe 1.2 that lists all of the resources based on type, and it lists every single item. And that file might be able to be used, but if you're using a restore with selectors, it becomes tougher to get an accurate number. Like you could just always use the total number from the backup and say this might be less based on selectors. But Velero processes selectors on an individual item at restore time. So it basically goes through the tarball and says, should I restore this item? No. Moves on. Should I restore this item? No. Move on. It doesn't go gather them all up first, which is why getting the count of total things to restore is tough.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what I am envisioning as progress reporting is kind of two-phased, right? So one is this Velero taking the backup tarball and processing each item.
Yep.
That is one progress report that we can generate. And the second is after Velero processes each backup item, whether or not it has passed all the selectors, all the condition, and created resources against the API server at restore time. That is another information we can process. And I think there's value in displaying both of them, right?
Right.
So I'm just curious if we can find a way to display both of these in the status conditions. Would that be a good idea?
Yeah. I think so. Like long term, I would love to see Velero do a 2-pass restore phase so that we can pass through the tarball, apply all the selection criteria, and then we make a list of exactly what we want to pull out of the tarball, and then we can use that for things like this, and build like a graph of what the plugins are going to restore and everything like that. So I would love to have a 2-phase system long term. In the short term, just doing it to get that number. I don't know. We would have to do some experiments. Because it basically involves because we don't have any help from the Cube API server here, you basically have to pull the YAML out and look at it. Look at each one. I think it's possible. It just it more or less. I mean, we may end up by doing this. May just be building that 2-phase restore system.
Sure.
I do support the idea of restoring in 2 phases because, for example, if you want to restore a namespace that have both data in the pod and the data, right? So and then the pod itself, right? So you have to kind of restore the namespace first, but you cannot restore the pod yet without restore the PVC. So this kind of 2-phase restore approach would be able to enable scenario like that to be executed in the Velero itself. Instead of right now, I would have to run the Velero 2 times, restore 2 times. The first time I restore some part of a Velero namespace I want. Then I restore the data. Then I restore the entire namespace again. So these two, I kind of support the 2-phase approach.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if we can accommodate getting this status without having to do it, but we may end up doing the whole 2-phase thing in order to get the status. I certainly wouldn't say no. I just like if folks at Red Hat are volunteering to go through it, I would just love to see design for it and discuss it. Yeah, because I absolutely we absolutely want this restore progress reporting. We just started with backup first because we get help from the Cube API server on reporting some of these stats.
Okay, great. Well, I will follow up with Pranav and Jada, and we will make sure that we submit a design proposal first. And then he'll probably reach out if there's any questions, I guess to you, Nolan. Would that be a good contact to bounce ideas off of, since Steve was the guy that did this?
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
right. Let's move into the next discussion topic. Anthony.
Yeah, so this, so Kalisia had mentioned about this before, but I just wanted to bring it up again. So this is this issue 2991, where we noticed that actually this is Sukana is on the call as well. So I think last week when we were doing the our final set of testing, we noticed that there was Velero was opening a lot of connections to the backup target. And so when we looked at it a little bit more, we found that seems in version 1.5, the new controller, the backup, the BCL controller was added, and this it was initializing the backup storage almost every second. And so for our plugin, what happens during init is we open a connection to the backup target as part of initializing the plugin. And so with this, because of this issue, Velero was opening a connection to the backup target every second. And it seems it's because of the BSL controller. So I took a look at it. It looks like it's a generic problem that will affect pretty much all object store plugins. And even for the Azure one, I think there's as part of init, there's an API call to Azure, I think, to list some storage account keys, which, if it's calling that, if Velero is calling this API every second, that's like a significant issue. So for us, we tested this, backup and restores work okay, but just the main issue is there's too many connections that are being opened every second by the BSL controller. And so we have our release end of this month, and we just found out this issue last week. And so we're trying to see if we can either get like a hot fix or at least something, the fix out soon. So I wonder if, Nolan, did you get a chance to look at it? And just for the question on the fix for this, how soon can you expect it?
I haven't looked too in depth at it, but I did have one question on what you expected to happen. You said setting it to 0 should skip validation. Do you want to skip validation entirely?
Yeah, so we wanted to skip validation. So from the docs, when you set the value, so on the backup storage location object, you can specify the validation frequency. And if you set it to 0, then you can have it skip validation. So I was trying it out just to see what was happening. And I was seeing that the Velero was actually initializing the backup storage. So I'll see plugin processes being opened, even though I've set the validation frequency to 0. And so we tried extending the validation frequency to like a big number, but still we can see the init process is being invoked by the BSL controller.
So I am testing this and to confirm where you're reporting, and hopefully if this is an issue, your PR will be the proper fix. The question I think that we have is, assuming I can replicate this and the PR open is a fix, and that's all we have to do is merge. When can we patch the code with this fix? Let's say, yeah, after we merge, when is the next patch that we are planning on putting out?
Yeah, I think 152 is going to have several big fixes. So I would like to get 152 out. I think I would like to get a fix for this, whether it's Anthony's PR or something else, and the fix for 2570 in, and then call 152 good. Because I think it has Scott's fix for CRD waiting and some other fixes. So I don't have a definitive date, but like I think we can get it in or get the 1.5.2 release out after we get these major fixes out.
But Nolan, in terms of timeline, is it like a week or?
I think it would depend on how long these take to implement and test, but I would hope a week. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So like Anthony mentioned, I mean, it's a big overhead for the backend.
Yep.
So this is per backup storage location. If you have multiple pointing to the same backup storage, then it's just bombarding the backend with connect requests, and it's just connect and disconnect. So, okay. So, but is there any process right now for Velero? Like if there are like showstoppers that were found in a release to issue a quick hotfix? Or
there isn't a process per se, but that's more on a case-by-case basis. But we need to test this fix too.
Right. So for this one, actually, even just seeing the issue, you have to run Velero in debug mode. That way you can see the plugin logs being propagated up.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, if you just run it regularly, it looks like the plugin logs are not being, they won't be visible in the Velero logs. So by running it in debug mode, you should see that almost every second the plugin process init method is called by the BSL controller.
Gotcha.
okay, so so we were hoping just get a hotfix with this fix, but Nolan, you're saying you wanted one more fix and make it part of 1.5.2.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions, comments for this topic? Okay, let's move into contributor shoutouts.
Kind of light week this week. We had contribution from Michael on adding a time zone package to the deployment manifest for allowing customization of the time zone on the container. So thank you, Michael. And also Jen Ting added some stuff to the Helm chart to allow for, let's see, can you check the files change, Jonas? Thanks. Let's see, looks like it's testing some of the scheduling on the, oh yeah, it's creating schedule on the Helm chart. So thank you for getting that merged, Jen Ting.
All right, and with that, we're going to close out the meeting. Thank you all for joining today. Have a fantastic rest of the week, and see you all next week. Bye, everyone.